August 20th, 2021 is one of the most iconic days in recent history, at least in the wrestling world. After 7 years of non-stop chanting his name, holding up signs in the crowd, Chicago's own CM Punk was back. It was a tumultuous moment and the culmination of a dream come true. When Punk left WWE in 2014, the chances of a return were very slim. He was burnt out, exhausted, and didn't want to deal with the hierarchy in WWE. And his love of wrestling disappeared like he did last month. Punk embarked on an MMA journey that made him into a laughingstock. Well, wrestling fans, of course, didn't see it that way because they know CM Punk from wrestling. But in MMA, it's a different story. CM Punk chants were still rampant in arenas all around the country, and very rarely would you hear about him mentioning wrestling. This was until, of course, 2019. He was opening up a little, saying if the money's right, he'll be there. There was a mysterious masked man that hit a GTS that same year, which fans speculated was CM Punk, because this was Ace Steel's promotion, I should know. With the advent of All Elite Wrestling, the company sent feelers in Punk's way, but he turned it down, saying sending offers through text messages isn't the way to go. So what did he do? He went to WWE backstage. It was a very shocking moment. WWE and Fox's relationship meant that the latter had a say in some things, and they were the ones that brought in Punk. He claimed to have changed the culture, but nothing happened. The backstage thing fizzled out, but Punk's passion grew to return. It was a spark turning into a flame. Rumors of his return literally started igniting a fire in All Elite Wrestling. Now, when I started watching AEW, it wasn't super hot. It was during the pandemic era where things were calm, but that summer was wild. It really seemed like they were on the cusp of something. The second episode of Rampage was literally sold on a rumor of Punk's return. He was playing into it as well, posting an Instagram story of the Chicago Bulls' theme song. August 20th arrives and the stage was set. The sold-out United Center anxiously awaited the return of their hero, and the pop that Punk received was so loud that you could barely hear his entrance theme song. He sat there and took it all in, and a moment like this only happens once in a lifetime. I'll never forget Excalibur telling everybody that Punk's back and you just have to wait 90 seconds to hear him speak. It's very surreal to see this man that once hated the mere mention of wrestling back in a wrestling ring. Punk spoke from the heart and said that he needed to feel this in order to think of what he had to say. He said that he heard the fans for 7 years. He's like, oh, your chants weren't falling on deaf ears. Punk explained how he had to leave ROH and professional wrestling on August 13th, 2005, and on August 20th, 2021, he's back. He admitted that sure, he was back for himself, but he was here to wrestle a bunch of guys in the back that had the same passion he had in the past. He's back because there's a couple of scores to settle, and then he called out Darby Allin. Darby was watching from a distance with a clear eagerness to face the Second City Saint. Punk announced his return for All Out, and man, was this a special moment. No doubt about it. It was insane seeing this guy again in the middle of a wrestling ring calling out others. Darby being Punk's first challenger was going to be great. I was hyped for it, but then again, if he faced just about anybody, it would have been big because the last time Punk was under contract to a wrestling company, the Spurs won the NBA championship. Their match at All Out was a very stark contrast to everything on the show. Punk was wrestling much slower, and sure, he was a bit rusty, but he still had it. Darby's one of my favorites from AEW, so I was going to enjoy this even if he half-assed it. But he did it, and Punk provided one of the best matches on the show. It felt very classic, especially compared to what others were doing on the show. He was wearing down Darby, doing the basics, and I'd compare it to whenever Edge wrestles nowadays. He brings a classic style to the show. Punk emerged victorious and went on to, as I'd say, try to give back to the wrestling game. Team Tez was pressing him, and I thought Ricky Starks was in line for a match with the Second City Saint, but instead it was Powerhouse Hobbs. Punk, of course, in the build to the match still had a sharp tongue on him, and at Arthur Ashe Stadium, he threatened Team Tez and told everyone that eventually they'll see the old CM Punk. He saw the attack as a positive and said that he needed this. Punk promised nobody was going to take this away from him, and he did beat Hobbs, but he had to go through hell getting the victory. As a matter of fact, it was a bit of luck. Hobbs' inexperience screwed him over, and Punk acknowledged this. So who's next? Daniel Garcia. Garcia's strategy was significantly different from Hobbs. He was submission-based. He had 2.0 by his side as well, but CM Punk had the return boost, so he won. Matt Sydal was a bit of a problem, but not as much as the others. Bobby Fish kicked out at 3.5 at this match because he hated CM Punk legitimately, but the next feud for the Second City Saint was with Eddie Kingston. Now, I should know at this point, they were telling a story of how Punk was a bit rusty, and he was struggling to go against talent that was considered inferior to him. That was basically the story at this point. But anyways, with that said, Kingston got all in Punk's face after getting attacked earlier on in the start of the program. CM Punk got all angry about being interrupted and mentioned the beef between them that he doesn't even know about. He's like, oh, apparently we have beef. They had the confrontation on Rampage, and let's just say that it was cracked up. CM Punk wanted an apology for Kingston interrupting him, and he was all hot. Kingston felt that everyone's hero should be pushed down to earth. He started going off on Punk and about how he was a hero of his back then. Then he went off like hell saying Punk judged him, and he said that he saw the locker room as a way to look past his issues in life, but Punk's out here saying he's fat, playing politics. That's the Punk he knows. CM Punk felt that he was an idiot holding him to the standard back then and called him a bum. He asked him if a bum fights through their problems, and he then admitted that nobody wants Punk in the locker room and told him to leave. He also threatened to smack him for looking at him like that. Damn. And then he put up the challenge for Full Gear. This was more than enticing for CM Punk, but he thought Full Gear was too much for Kingston. Perhaps darker elevation. Eddie was enraged. His rage was about to bring a fight in this moment, but CM Punk accepted that challenge, and Kingston said that he's not trying to win, he's going to kick his ass. And then he said that after this beating, Punk should quit again and leave for 7 years. He goes for the headbutt and the brawl was on. This thing was more intense than just about anything in AEW at this point. It came from a real place with Kingston having gripes, having problems with CM Punk. This all dates back to Ring of Honor. Punk saw Kingston as somebody beneath him, a failure, a person that was unsuccessful, and their match at Full Gear was wild. For one, Punk was wearing these MMA shorts, and Kingston saw this and was like, let's remind him of his time in UFC. Punk looked so dazed at this point, he thought he was at the MGM Grand. It was a pure fight. You could feel the emotion and hatred that these two had for each other. Eddie looked like a crazed lunatic who would stop at nothing to destroy Punk's return, but the best in the world was on a whole other level. Even though he had beaten Kingston, he was almost in disbelief that he had to endure that and still came out of it the winner. Of course, Kingston still didn't want anything to do with him. So now that Punk went through Darby and Eddie Kingston, who's next? Maxwell Jacob Friedman. He disrespected MJF by refusing his handshake, and MJF was more than eager to lay into him. Before Punk's match with QT Marshall, MJF interrupted. He wanted to show him that his actions weren't very good, and this being Chicago, the fans chanted "shut up" at him. He took a jab at Punk, saying he never saw somebody who was straight edge looking like a meth addict, and he said that Punk on the mic has been big fish in a small pond. Now he's a minnow in front of him, and he was ready to finish him quicker than his UFC career. Damn. Punk drops pipe bombs, he drops nukes. Now it was Punk's turn. He thanked MJF for introducing himself last week and said that he finally learned that MJF stood for Maxwell. He used to think it was my jealous fan. He purposely refused to mention him in press conferences, and it was only going to feed his ego if he did. Punk held himself in high regard for shutting MJF up without even saying a word. Then Punk called him a less famous Miz. Miz chants intensified, and MJF says that CM Punk is nostalgia. He admitted that he was a fan of his. He was the best, but ever since he returned, he struggled to beat easy competition and says nothing interesting. He also said that Punk's been kissing ass and did an impression of him. MJF said that looking into his eyes, if anyone needs to go to sleep, it's Punk. He called him PG Punk and said that he should be preaching hustle, loyalty, respect. The problem is, he can see him though. He can see right through him. He's talking about how he wants to come back for the young people, yet he's back for the money. Oh, I can't change professional wrestling from my couch in Chicago. Well, why did you stay on the couch for 7 years? MJF felt that it was because of fear. The fear of being a failure. And he claimed that PG Punk envied him. Why? Because he represents everything in wrestling that Punk hates. A guy who's clean cut, this and that. And he said that he's every wrestling pundit's wet dream. Throughout his whole career, he's been second best. Whether it was a You Can't See Me man or the King of Kings, things will be no different here. Punk admitted that he didn't know if the fans cared about him. He didn't know he had it in him, but he certainly wasn't scared of MJF. He said that he was selling out MSG while MJF was marking out over Rosie O'Donnell. He said that he's going to make the New York Times by as an obituary. MJF needs protection to beat others, and he's been replaced on the 4 pillars by Britt Baker. He said that Chicago is known as the second city because when it burns down, they build things up, and it was more than gracious to be number 2. He said that the only way MJF becomes number 1 is if Tony has a daughter that he marries. Punk was ready to punch him below, calling it a needle, but MJF didn't want none. Great promo. Both men were throwing some sharp-ass shots at each other. It was intense and really one of the best promos from 2021. MJF was rough. CM Punk showed that edge that everyone knew he had. It was great. The following week, MJF made fun of Punk for barely beating Lee Moriarty and QT Marshall. He said that Punk was the best in the world at getting into Britt Baker's pants and even said that's what she'd look like if they were in the bedroom. Punk made fun of his attire and asked him to come into the ring. MJF refused to compete with PG Punk, saying he's the spark to a flame that Punk hasn't had since 2011. And one of the only times we've seen CM Punk be a heel on screen in AEW, he played the heel role comfortably. He's talking about, in my hometown of Chicago, all of the Long Island fans were booing him. It was a good thing, but we never got to see much more of it because of the incident that had occurred recently. It wouldn't take long for the best in the world to go face-to-face with Maxwell Jacob Friedman. He joined Sting and Darby Allin to face FTR and MJF on a special holiday episode of Dynamite. Great match, of course Punk didn't lose. His unbeaten run remained, and he was still pressing MJF. He handed the victory to Captain Shawn Dean by dropping him with a GTSY in order to prevent an unbeaten year for MJF, and he told him that this is what's going to happen every time until he steps into the ring with him. Until then, he's not getting a title shot because of his actions. MJF said that everything that comes from Punk's mouth is fake and induces boredom. He said that he makes him relevant, and all this talk about calling him a waste of money when he's the guy that sold Tony Khan and the fans a bill of goods. He said that he's not the savior the fans have been waiting for, saying he, MJF, is nothing like Roddy Piper, because Roddy Piper was MJF's MJF's favorite wrestler. He's one of his all-time favorites. He's like, what about you? He said that Pyro was talented enough to main event WrestleMania. Punk was ready for a fight and said that if MJF thinks the grass is greener on the other side, he can main event a buy one get one free extravaganza and get released faster than he lasted in a sec. And he'll be here waiting for him to kick his ass until then. MJF was enraged. He wanted a match, but not the match Punk wanted, but a match with Wardlow. For this match, something had to give. Either Punk's streak ends or Wardlow's. Wardlow actually had the match in the bag. He was doing the most, but MJF was telling him to continue. He was down for the count, but for Max, it didn't matter. This allowed CM Punk to take advantage and win it with a roll-up. Why? Because I guess it comes down to him being Super Punk. The match, if booked that way, Wardlow hitting all these powerbombs, it should have been him that won it. He hit 10 powerbombs, one through a table, yet he still managed to lose. It's odd. MJF's guys were doing his dirty work. Sure, Wardlow didn't enjoy it, but the damage was done. The chairman wanted some of them as well, and he said that Punk's gonna face somebody with 20 years experience, not a guy with a few years in one move. Did he expose him though? No. At this point, all that was stopping CM Punk was the fact that the match wasn't official. MJF did give in eventually, but he wanted the match in Chicago. Maxwell saw this match as a breaking point. He said that the fans are finally going to see the real CM Punk. The CM Punk who loses his fake smile the second he doesn't get what he wants. The CM Punk who blames his failures on everyone but himself. The CM Punk that if he doesn't get his due, he just sues. He said that February 2nd, CM Punk leaves wrestling. Another slap in the face of the fans is him leaving in 2005. He didn't. Why? Because it was when he turned his back on the fans by no showing an event in the same arena. That's when he left professional wrestling. The fans started chanting CM Punk, and he's like, all those chants are going to stop him from turning his back on them and crying on a podcast. Punk saw this as an example of MJF being a fan, and he said that he'd rather be himself and fail than be MJF, who talks a lot and never shows up. Of course, MJF took advantage of Punk's words and brought out his guys to attack. To top it all off, he sat atop him and said that it's poetic that the same place he returned is the place where his run ends. So this is what it's come down to. MJF felt that CM Punk was a coward for walking away. In doing so, he turned his back on the very same fans that bought his merch and supported him for years, including himself. MJF also didn't appreciate being a fan of his and not being acknowledged at all by his former hero. For Punk, he was teaching him a lesson. Their match in the February 2nd episode of Dynamite was something. Now, my problem with this match is that it went on for far too long. It went through a bunch of commercial breaks, if I remember correctly. It was almost 40 minutes. They should have cut some time off here. Other than that, I liked it. MJF tried cheating to win with the tag rope but found no success, and the difference maker ended up being Wardlow. He had some problems with MJF but was stuck under contract, and he provided him a crucial assist to beat CM Punk and end his unbeaten run in All Elite Wrestling. For Punk, earning the opportunity to face MJF again came at a price. He had to beat FTR with Jon Moxley. This was an awesome match. There was so many convincing near falls, incredible action. This match didn't have to hit as hard as it did. That ending was too damn smooth, and CM Punk won the right to face Maxwell Jacob Friedman. So what did Punk choose? He chose Revolution, and he wanted Max to learn a lesson. So he wanted a dog collar match with him. Then Punk told him to come on, brought out a picture of young MJF. He said that this was the greatest day in his life, whereas for him, it was a regular Friday. He said the prices he paid to see him on that day pales in comparison to March 6th. This led to MJF cutting an incredible promo on being bullied at school, and the terrible days were overlooked because he was gonna meet CM Punk. He said that he wanted to become a wrestler just like CM Punk. He went through hell, watching tapes until his eyes bled, cut promos in front of the mirror, and then in January of 2014, he left him. He left him when he needed him most, and it was a realization of something to him. He said that if the best in the world couldn't do it, what about me? But he was inspired. He made a promise that whatever Outcast kid had him to watch on the TV, he's not going to walk out on them like Punk. He called him a gutless coward and said that March 6th, he could choke him with a chain, whip him with a chain, make him bleed buckets, but if he quits, it'll make him no better than CM Punk. All of a sudden, he came on awkwardly, tried getting to the bottom of this. MJF admitted that this was true, the entire thing, and was an incredible promo. Easily one of the very best in MJF's career. He had a start to this villain arc, and he wasn't always like this. It was CM Punk that caused him to become the devil, as he called himself. He was evil, but he had his weaknesses. He had his insecurities, unlike a regular villain, He's like, oh, I'm bad, this and that. MJF was bad, but in his eyes, he has reasonings for becoming that. CM Punk, on the other hand, felt that what MJF said was true, but felt that they were being used to make him the villain. Then he came out. He admitted that he used to do terrible things. He said that this was about the little kid that looked up to him and said that he tries to be a good person. MJF all of a sudden hugged him before he kicked him in the balls. He unleashed a vicious beatdown that brought so much blood out of CM Punk, and he called him a stupid old man and admitted that he was a snake before using one of Punk's quotes. He said that the greatest trick that the devil convinced the world was that he didn't exist, and Sunday he's going to show everyone that he's the devil himself. This most definitely unlocked what CM Punk was truly capable of. He said that MJF's going to find out that he's the master. Punk took great offense to PG Punk and congratulated MJF on bringing back his old self. So in essence, Maxwell Jacob Friedman accomplished nothing attacking him. If anything, he was hurting himself. MJF trolled everyone with cult of personality, and Punk brought back his old ROH self. It was like 2005 except the long hair. The match was well done. It provided the feud a perfect ending, and the action was gritty, violent, and rough. For CM Punk, it was mission complete. He taught MJF a lesson. Sure, it was with the help of Wardlow who gave him the ring, but he won. As defiant as ever though, MJF went out the loser. It was a tremendous match that fit the rivalry and also gave MJF something to get angry about with Wardlow. As for CM Punk, it was now time to go after the title. He faced Dax Harwood in a Bret Hart Psychology old school tribute match, which was pretty damn good. This is when everyone was making fun of them for the Bret Hart circle jerk. You know, these guys showed just how much fanboys they were for Bret Hart. Punk won, of course, and after the match, he signaled that he wanted the title. He followed up by whooping Platinum Max Caster's ass, and this is when he explicitly spoke about the title. He said that there's gray in his beard, and by the time his run in AEW is over, there'll be much more. Before his time in AEW is over, he will be world champion. Punk went at it with Penta, Dustin Rhodes, which was an old school match that really impressed a lot of people, and Hangman Adam Page was certainly ready for this confrontation. Punk assured everyone that he was as well. He said that going through Darby Allin to Dustin Rhodes made him prepared. He said that he's not a betting man, but he will always gamble on himself. He told Hangman that he's going to fight until the wheels fall off, but Hangman, on the other hand, didn't feel the same way. He was aggressive. The champion said that there's going to be no handshakes, no masturbatory Bret Hart match. He's going to destroy CM Punk. He told the fan that when he's done with Punk, he's going to want to get a refund for that shirt if he doesn't burn the thing beforehand. Hangman told Punk that he's going to get a fight, the fight of his life. Now, what did he think about this? He thought Hangman was taking it personal. He said that when it comes to the title, it's just business. He said that when he wakes up in the morning, he asks himself if he's a good person. Today, he asked if he was the champion. Punk said that whether Hangman's conscious or unconscious, he's going to shake his hand. Both men stole each other's finishers, and this was the most intense Hangman had been in months. The champion told him that there's nothing he could do to take away the title from him. The man was determined, and the challenger felt that he was taking this personally and praised him. He's like, why are you so mad? The champion said that Punk in Vegas is full circle. You know, pipe bomb all the way to this moment. His most important moment began there. Hangman said that he considered not saying this, but since Punk would, if it actually came down to it, he wanted to tell him how he feels about him. Hangman said that he had no respect for what Punk did in AEW. He said that being champion is not just about the matches, it's about those moments in the back. You talk a big game about workers' rights, yeah, well, you've shown the exact opposite since you got here. The sentence that caused hell in All Elite Wrestling was just uttered. That's the sentence there that caused a whole lot of hell in the back. Hangman said that he was defending this title not against CM Punk, but defending All Elite Wrestling from him. This is what Hangman Adam Page needed. People were like, oh, he needed that edge. Well, there it is. Punk said that if Hangman's so upset about him being here, he has to do something about it. And the roads that he's traveled, he paved them. The house he built, it was constructed of lumber from trees he chopped down. He was the one that gave them the blueprint of All Elite Wrestling. He started demanding he shake his hand, and Hangman struck. CM Punk's year-long journey for championship gold went through so many trials. The fact that he was struggling with weaker opponents, a fan-turned rival, and the fact that he has to wake up in the morning and ask himself, am I a good person? About this match, I unfortunately fell asleep as it was beginning, and all I remember was a superplex from the live watch. But it was good. I watched it again the next day. Each guy was out here stealing moves. CM Punk hilariously botched the buckshot, but then again he was messing up often in matches. Hangman was coming to terms that maybe cheating is the way to go, but hesitating proved to be his downfall, and CM Punk with a GTS won the AEW World Heavyweight Championship. Punk was crying tears of joy, and it was something special to him. I should also note that this was the first time he held the title since January of 2013. The summer of Punk was upon us. What could go wrong? Punk's out here teaming up with FTR. He's happy. He's champion. Tanahashi's going to face him. But then he revealed that he hurt himself. He suffered a foot injury, and he was going to have to go away. This moment was heartbreaking. Man just won the title, and he didn't even say hello with it. Now he's got to go away. That said, an interim champion was in place in the time that he was gone. So CM Punk was still champion. Fast forward 2 months later, Quake at the Lake, Jon Moxley beat Lionheart Chris Jericho. He's getting attacked when Wheeler, Ortiz, and Eddie Kingston made the save. The Jericho Appreciation Society, though, outnumbered them, and with no hope, CM Punk interrupts making his return. The crowd goes insane. Jim Ross Jarrett goes insane. The original champion is here, and this is when Mox straight up disrespects him. So now the road to All Out was on. CM Punk was back, and he's here to show everyone who the true champion was. Unfortunately, though, the CM Punk that returned was full of fire. Just not in the good way. He called out Hangman Adam Page and put him on blast, saying that's coward. And then he said that the apology has to be as loud as the disrespect. and said that if anyone has a problem with the champion, they should come on down. Then he went on to trash Jon Moxley, saying he's the third best man in his group, and that's a recurring theme in his career. He said that his friend Eddie is the third best Eddie he wrestled and the second best Kingston. Hell, Jon Moxley is not the first John that he beat for a belt in Chicago. As for Mox, he said that Punk writes checks that his body can't cash. He said that Punk's words mean nothing, his title doesn't mean anything. Hell, even Mox's title means nothing until he beats Punk. Interim champion makes him think of Punk, and that's what he hates. He hates the mere mention of CM Punk. Punk said that Mox could be the heart and soul. He could be the dollars and cents. Mox didn't want to hear any of that, saying that Punk came to AEW because he ran out of money. He said that being the best is about fighting spirit, and Punk ran out of it a long time ago. He said that the match is at the pay-per-view, and if he touches him now, he'll bleed all over the place. A brawl ensues. It happens again an hour later after Mox called him out, so the match was pushed forward to the following week. Punk was destroyed with ease after it had seemed like he had injured himself again. Mox beat him in a squash match, which was enthralling. It was really something crazy watching it live. It was almost unbelievable. Jon Moxley had beaten the jobber CM Punk in Cleveland. It's a bit ironic. He knew that All Out wasn't going to happen by the looks of it and laid out an open challenge. He obviously wasn't expecting CM Punk to accept it. CM Punk, meanwhile, was doubting himself. He was cleared by the doctors, but Punk felt that this was a new 100%. Basically, his absolute best now is not enough. Maybe the love isn't enough now as well. All of a sudden, Ace Steel interrupted. He inspired him to new heights with this promo, and he awakened the fire within. He dropped the F-bomb, slapped him, and it got to the point where Chicago forced him to sign the contract for the title match. He started going off about how they've been trying to kill him since the day he's born, and he hasn't given up. And Jon Moxley's certainly not that guy that's gonna kill him. He said that Jon Moxley may be a wild thing, but he's not wild enough. And then he spoke as the voice of the city and said that Moxley can't break his bones, drink his blood, because they are Chicago. This man was wilding. He made it seem like all hope was lost, and from out of nowhere, he just exploded full of intensity and confidence. It was some Rocky-esque stuff, and after this promo, I knew CM Punk would reclaim the title. There was no doubt about it. It was his arc, not Jon Moxley's. Him winning the title was a small thing. It was all about making CM Punk look good. Mox told him that if he wants to go out on his shield in Chicago, okay. He said that whatever miracle he has left in him, he better find it fast, because when the bell rings, he's going to be trying to take his head off and promise to put on a display of brutality and violence that CM Punk has never experienced. What about this guy? This guy had so much fire and anger within. The build for this match was ridiculous. The story wasn't about Mox keeping the title. It was about CM Punk proving he still has it in him. He's got the fire and confidence, but most importantly, he's got the city behind him. All Out was his night, no doubt about it. The match was pretty good. I didn't think it was out of this world or anything like that, but it once again fit the storyline perfectly. Punk had to scratch and claw just to keep up with All Elite Wrestling's best, let alone beat him, and he did just that. So now, two-time champion CM Punk. But then he got overshadowed by MJF's return. The devil of AEW was getting cheers in Chicago over the hometown hero CM Punk. What the hell's going on? It was crazy, and to top it all off, that was overshadowed in itself by the press conference from hell, and today CM Punk's issues with the Elite and a muscle injury he suffered prevent him from returning. As a matter of fact, at this point, it's rumored that AEW is going to buy out his contract. The only thing preventing it from happening is the terms of the no-compete clause. So they're worried he could go to WWE, which in itself sounds ridiculous. For CM Punk, this AEW run was at face value given back to the wrestling game. He wanted to face young talent, make them look good, but it was all about placing the spotlight on himself as well. He was the undisputed number one heading into the summer, and even when he returned, it seemed like he was number one. His storyline seemed to be building towards a big heel turn because Eddie Kingston, MJF, Hangman were talking about how nobody wants him in the locker room, and it really looked like he was going to call himself the savior of AEW and turn his back on the fans. It started slow, but then MJF came around and they started going, no pun intended, all out. His matches at times had the sloppiness to him. CM Punk would botch a move, especially if it was on the top rope in the corner. He'd be botching, and they were noticeable. He wasn't already the most athletic, but that was 7 years ago. So now it was a whole different story of athleticism. CM Punk was not the same guy that he was 7 years ago. And even then, he wasn't really a good athlete. But he really had an intelligent mind inside the ring and used the story and old school style to his advantage. Another thing to mention is that he was seen as injury prone. Man was starting to be considered the Anthony Davis or Marco Royce of AEW. Towards the end, he was still sharp-tongued as ever. A lot of great promos this time around. As for what I think about this run, he really didn't do much. Especially when you see who was on the roster. He didn't interact with Chris Jericho once. Then there's Bryan Danielson, Kenny Omega, Cody, who eventually left, of course, and Samoa Joe. He did a lot, but at the same time, he didn't really do much. It's really unfortunate, as I think Punk was really a huge asset to the roster. His year run had the greatest beginning and the worst ending. There's a bunch of TV matches I enjoyed of his. The pay-per-view matches delivered, and the promos and character work was great. but he had issues. Who knows if they're going to work out the issues? It seems unlikely at this point that they're going to work them out. But yeah, my favorite match from the CM Punk run was probably the MJF match from Revolution. It was a great one. It was a great way to end the feud. And I really thought they were going to have another chapter into the story with MJF winning the title from Punk, but it didn't happen. It is what it is. Or what do you guys think of CM Punk's AEW run? Please comment down below, and that's it for this video. Make sure you hit the Anaconda device on the like button, perhaps a GTS on the subscribe button. Peace. I'm out.